Welcome back to another Post Media Ottawa Senators panel. I'm Bruce Garriock, pleased to be joined today in the festive season by Ken Warren of Post Media here in Ottawa and Dean Brown, the play-by-play voice of the Ottawa Senators on TSN 1200. Guys, we're all looking festive. It's that time of the season. Dean, you look like a giant elf,
Thank
and
you.
Kenny's got a nice hockey sweater on. I have a fireplace sweater that the fireplace used to light up, but it's not working anymore. Anyways, good to see you guys. We're going to talk about 2022, the year in review, and it didn't start out the way the Ottawa Senators expected. They were sellers at the trade deadline for a fifth straight year in a season that they had hoped that they would at least compete for a playoff spot. But clearly, this team made some steps in the right direction as we head into 2023. Dean, let's start with you.
Well, I think with the team itself, there's higher expectations that it would be a breakout year. But, the franchise, while it was coming out of the rebuild for sure, because all the heavy lifting in that area had been done, there just was not enough depth within the organization to be able to survive and maintain any kind of consistency in winning. When you went through the number of injuries and illnesses that they had, the amount of players that were taken out by COVID, the number of players who got injured long term, the wrong guys getting injured, important players getting injured, and it just kind of sabotaged any kind of attempt to make that forward progress that they had planned and hoped for. Maybe other more established franchises that had, a deeper roster might have been able to get through that. But while this team has been rebuilding, it has been very young. And when you have a cluster of your most important players that are very young, that creates a depth issue. That's just one of the byproducts. And they just couldn't get over that. So I think probably we're going to look back on this last year. In a couple of years, we'll look back and say that was kind of the skip year. Because they probably should have made a bigger step as an organization, but they just weren't able to do it because of all the reasons we've all talked about. So I think now probably this is the year where that step was supposed to come from, and ironically enough, I think they've been hampered again by almost the same kind of things. You go through what they've gone through this year already, where there's not many teams in this league that are going to do very well when they're missing their number one center, their number one defenseman, and their number two defenseman for the amount of time that they have been without Norris, and at different times Shabbat and Zub. So the steps are still happening, but still I think from last year and now into this, I don't think they're happening nearly as fast as people had hoped, but they're certainly happening.
Ken, one of the things that happened in March was the passing of owner Eugene Melnyk after a lengthy illness. Since then, the team has been run by a three-person board. And in early November, we learned that the Senators were going up for sale. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. I do think the timing of it was, because I thought it might take a little longer than that. But as we speak right now, the Senators are in a sale process. And the NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman confirmed on Monday a post-media report that he would like Ryan Reynolds involved in the ownership of this team going forward in some way, shape, or form. How do you think, I know you watch Welcome to Wrexham. I know Reynolds would like to do a Welcome to Ottawa series. How do you think that would work here?
Oh, I'm intrigued by it. I think, we're in Ottawa. We know all the issues in Ottawa. We've been down this road with Eugene Melnyk and what might happen, and their problems with whether the rink is too far out. And we're familiar with the LeBreton Flats, over 20, 30 years in development. But all of that stuff would be new to an audience outside of Ottawa. And I believe that's kind of what part of the interest level is for Gary Bettman. Hey, let's introduce these markets. And what's this market all about? And that Ryan Reynolds would like to sell things like the rivalries with Toronto and Montreal. I assume that. And then into the process of what goes into building a team, buying a team. The backstory, I think, would be really intriguing for a lot of people to understand what's going on. I think that's created, we know it's created a lot of excitement in the market. The team, whether they're, not a great start to the season, we've been through their November, which was not very good. But while all that was going on, there's this separate side story about, the future of ownership and who might be involved. And I think that Ryan Reynolds issue has really been a spark in terms of getting people's attention on, hey, this could be a very good NHL market, and of course it's tied into a new rink that's going to happen with new ownership as well. So I think it's all very positive, big picture, regardless of what's happening on the ice.
Dean, you look at the Senators, and Gary Bettman stated Monday that more than a dozen groups have shown interest in the club. I think some of those will partner up and when push comes to shove. But as Kenny said, having a Hollywood star with that kind of reach doesn't just make sense to the Ottawa Senators. It makes sense to the National Hockey League. You can't buy the space that he'd bring you, could you?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. It would be, a great thing for the Ottawa Senators, because it's such a hot, it reaches people outside of the hockey realm. That, there's lots of, I know this sounds strange to Ottawa Senators fans, but there's lots of people who love and are on the edge of their seat anytime a guy like Ryan Reynolds does anything, but they don't know anything about the Ottawa Senators, nor do they care. They start to care, though, when they realize he's involved. So it just brings, a level of connection with, the fans that might not be fans yet, but they're fans of Ryan Reynolds. There's just so many other opportunities. And I think for the league, Bruce and Gary Bettman, what they potentially see is a very, very lucrative and very, very, let's just say it could open up new vistas other places, because it kind of has the possibility of opening up a little celebrity wormhole. If this works for Ryan Reynolds and becomes a positive thing, he has friends. He has friends in the entertainment business. He has friends who are actors, artists, producers, directors, financiers. And maybe if it works out well for him and it's a positive thing, maybe the next time there's an ownership opportunity or a partial somewhere else, maybe one of his friends wants to get involved. It's never a bad thing connecting the other entertainment industry with the sports entertainment industry. And I think for the league and Gary Bettman, they see this as certainly it would be a great thing for Ottawa right off the bat. And that's why they really do want whomever buys this team to have Ryan Reynolds involved. But they're not stupid. They see that possible wormhole to other franchises, to the rest of the league. And they see that could be a very good entry point with a very, very entertaining and very popular personality like Ryan Reynolds.
And as we moved towards the summer, we saw General Manager Pierre Dorion make a lot of trades, moves, signings, what have you. The club, Kenny, traded its first-round pick for Alex Brinkat. They brought in Claude Giroux as an unrestricted free agent, brought him home, would be a good way to put it. They brought in goaltender Cam Talbot from the Minnesota Wild to help stabilize the goaltending. One of the most active summers in the history of this team, I'd say, wouldn't you? And then
Absolutely.
We can pick up from there.
Well, absolutely, and that created a great buzz. And again, it tied into a lot of change. Bringing some alumni back, giving them more profile. It was a very optimistic summer in a lot of different ways. I mean, we can pick and choose, and I still think the big fish of another defenseman never happened. We know how difficult that is to get depth on defense, but up front, I mean, they're going through here, as we talk at the end of the year, they've gone through the injury problems up front with Norris, of course, and Tim Stützle. Bring in a guy like Claude Giroux. If they didn't have brought in that veteran presence, they'd be even in a deeper hole up front, and how you're going to plug those holes. So a very good job in adding depth and some veteran depth in that respect. Just you can never do enough to get your team, to fill all the holes. And I just the one thing there was the defenseman, which maybe we'll see that happen if the Senators get back into the race here, late this year, early next year. Maybe that move becomes a little bit more pressing for Pierre Dorion.
Dean, I think the guy who's made the biggest impact of all the people that Pierre Dorion added in the summer, and I think you'd agree with me, is Claude Giroux. Not only by his mere presence, but also by the impact he's made on the ice. I mean, this guy, if anyone had any doubts, I don't think anybody in Ottawa did, but this guy can still play.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no question about that. I think the long-term legacy, though, of what Giroux is doing here. And, down the road when we're looking back on his time in Ottawa, I think one of the things we're all going to point to is the impact he had on younger players. The reason this team is right now the fourth best face-off team in the entire NHL isn't just because Claude Giroux personally is the second best face-off guy in the league. You look at the face-off numbers of Kastelik. You look at the face-off numbers of Pinto. Pinto is of all the rookies in the league, he is by far the best face-off man, and it's almost 10% difference, which in face-off percentage is like planetary. His dominance amongst rookies in the face-off circle is in no small part due to the tutoring that they've all been getting from Claude Giroux. And over and above just that one individual skill and how much he has affected the team in that area, I think as we see now with this team, it's starting to move into a different area where Claude is a guy who is a veteran player, but also kind of a semi-coach. And while maybe not in the area of a speech, just his body language and his demeanor is helping the younger players understand that to be successful in this game, you have to have a short memory. You can't get too high. You can't get too low. You can't be devastated by losses and overjoyed with wins during the regular season. You have to be able to keep an everyday level approach to everything so you can do your work, and that's what creates results. And those contributions are not something where you can, count them and here's a scale and you look at them. But for those of us, like, the three of us who are around there every day, you can see that it's real. You can see that this is happening. And I think when we look back, it's not just going to be the points that Claude Giroux produces while he's an Ottawa Senator before he retires. It's the legacy of his impact on the younger players of this team, because I think it has been very solid so far. And by the time he is done playing, I think when you look back, he will have had a dramatic effect on probably Ottawa's most important players. And that is going to do nothing but good things for this franchise. So I think the value of signing Claude Giroux is more than just the goals and assists that he can individually produce.
Guys, before we go, looking ahead to 2023, Senators never promised, and Ken, we'll start with you, and then wrap with Dean. The Senators never promised that they'd be a playoff team, but they did say they wanted to play meaningful games in March. Given given the stretch they've had before Christmas, can they play meaningful games in March?
I think it's going to be very difficult. I think they need both goalies to be on top of their games because they're going to have to steal some wins to get. They gotta go something along the lines of 650 hockey, and to do that, you need some breaks. You need some fantastic goaltending. You need contributions from more than all the. We talk about all the stars. The stars, of course, have to keep going. The power play has been really good, but you're going to have to get a lot of guys chipping in areas along the way. You got to steal some wins and get some ugly wins to keep progressing. And like you said earlier, Dean, when you lose one, flush it away and move on to the next one, because there's just you just have to get a stretch of games where you don't lose momentum.
Dean,
I think it's going to be very difficult.
While I sit by the fireplace, please.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. I think that it's going to be very difficult for this team to catch up to get into a legitimate race for a playoff spot, because after Christmas things get so tight, and you can play great for a month and only move up 2 spots. So it's very, very difficult. And the other thing is, if Ottawa has the same kind of injury luck in the second half of the season that they've had in the first half, they have no choice. They have no chance. You can't suffer those kinds of injuries in the second half of the season and hope to either stay in a race or get in a race. But I think that this team is going to make some progress in the second half of the season. And while it's not going to be to legitimately challenge for a playoff spot, as much as people would like to see that happen, everybody would like to see that happen. I'm not sure that's possible. But I don't know if that's going to be the headline story in the second half of the season. I think that we all know, we've all seen how important the next home of this team is. And I think the sale of the team and what's going to happen at LeBreton is going to be the headline for this franchise in the second half of the season. And I think that's probably going to take over an awful lot of conversations between here and the end of the regular season.
Yeah, and the clock is ticking on that deal at LeBreton, and the clock is ticking on us to get our holiday shopping done. Guys, Ken Warren of Post Media in Ottawa, Dean Brown, the play-by-play voice of the Ottawa Senators on TSN 1200. Thanks for joining us. Have a happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. And we'll be back here with the Post Media Senators panel in January 2023. Take care.
Happy Christmas.